Hey everyone, Stephen here with a fresh off the couch reaction to episode 5 of Loki. First of all, this was a good episode. I'm not going to shit on this episode at all. This was a really good episode with a lot of really, really good things that happened in it that we will get to in a moment. But let me first tell you about my frustration with this particular episode. Have you ever seen The Hobbit or The Hunger Games? This felt like, especially with The Hobbit is based off of one book. They created an entire trilogy of movies off of one book, which was completely unnecessary. They could have literally done The Hobbit, which is not a long read book. They could have done The Hobbit in 1, 2.5 hour kind of a movie. The problem that I have specifically with episode 5, the frustration that I have specifically with episode 5 is the Hobbit of it all. It's very much the frustration that I had with Ahsoka, even though I really enjoyed Ahsoka as well. If you haven't seen my fresh off the couch reactions to Ahsoka, please go see those because they're really, really good. But my big frustration with Ahsoka was it was a lot of setup, to wherein entire episodes would be devoted to setup that wouldn't get resolved until 2 or 3 episodes down the line or the next episode. And Ahsoka as a whole, as I said in my final review of Ahsoka itself felt like a setup to the next season. It feels like a trilogy. And Ahsoka was A New Hope, episode 6, A New Hope. But anyway, this episode felt like that. Even though there were a lot of really, really, really good things that happened in this episode, it felt like a setup to the next episode. And I will tell you this: if in fact Loki isn't more than an hour, if it isn't at least, I should say, if it isn't at least an hour, the season finale of Loki, if it isn't at least an hour, I will feel ripped off. Because if it is like a half an hour, it could have easily been wrapped up tonight. And that's been my frustration with this episode. Even though a lot of really good stuff happened this episode,
Oh, absolutely.
it felt like it's unnecessarily being stretched out like The Hobbit. It's unnecessarily being stretched out into 6 episodes when perhaps it could have been wrapped up in 4. I will only change my mind about that if, in fact, the season finale is at least an hour long. If it's not at least an hour long, then I will feel ripped off in a way. But so that is my big frustration with season 5. Jordan, do you have any frustration with this particular episode, or were you good with it?
Honestly, I was pretty good with it.
Okay.
Overall, my opinion of this episode, um, I was not expecting them to have an episode basically right after the fall of the TVA. The moment after that, we start going into the variant backstories, basically, like what the heroes that we've loved, what their variant lives were like.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but feel the simplistic joy of they finally gave Mobius a jet ski.
Yes.
That gives me so much joy. The fact that OB was a science fiction author, as someone who always wanted to be a writer, I love and respect that. It's
Mm-hmm.
so good. The fact that, I forget her name, but the hunter lady,
B-15.
B-15, thank you, that she was a doctor made perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
And just everyone just had really good, and I'll make a joke about how, like, why is, like, kind of like it makes it's kind of weird that, like, Sylvie is still kind of here,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end it's like, no, it makes perfect sense. She's got to go back to her town, but she's got to work back at McDonald's.
But she's okay with that, you know? She's okay with working at McDonald's.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's perfectly fine with it. Yeah.
which honestly, hey, power to her. She spent her whole life being on the run and being a survivor. Being an NPC sounds great. um, that sounds mean, but and Casey being a prisoner from Alcatraz is funny.
Yeah. Yeah. What you were saying about how each of their variant lives made sense for them. Casey's completely
Yeah,
took me off guard. It's like I didn't get, there's nothing in his. Well, but you could say the same thing about B-15. There's nothing about who she is as a hunter that would dictate or, harken back to her being a doctor,
I
you
mean, I
know?
would argue with B-15. Um, she always seemed a bit more empathetic. She always kind of had, like, when the beginning of the season, she was like the voice of empathy and trying to.
Sure.
So I think there's kind of like that, like, a little bit there. As for Casey, um, my first and main thought is, all right, you work for the TVA now. We're gonna make sure that you have an attitude adjustment, because we can't. Because if you want to survive, you're gonna be a bit more polite, a bit more nicer. Um, I feel like something happened with Casey. Also, we don't know what Casey's life was besides being a criminal. Um,
That's true. And also,
but also, I kind of feel like that one played a bit towards the sorry to play sort of joke of, like, this one's like, I wasn't expecting that origin.
sure. And I wasn't mad at it,
Yeah,
at all. I thought, okay, that's pretty cool,
yeah. The scene
Um,
was pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna um a couple of other things about the show. Um, you always know a show is either really good or really bad when you have to pause it to ask questions about what you just saw.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it's a really good show because I had to pause it. There's a moment at the very beginning of the show wherein I had to pause it and ask Jordan if we hadn't seen a similar scene to what we just saw, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in a previous episode. I wasn't quite sure. He thought that perhaps it did happen, but it resolved itself within this particular episode. And so that kind of thing wherein you're constantly having to say, were we already here? Did we already do this? It's happened more than a few times within the course of this season, wherein things that, like, it's either an Easter egg or it's things that have happened that then get clarification, a couple of episodes down the line. Like, for instance, the big one, when Loki gets purged in the very first episode. And it's not until episode
Three.
3 or 4
Yeah.
that we figure out he actually purged himself. So, and then we had to pause it and talk about it. Um, it's stuff like that that happens all the time in this show, wherein we're watching, we have to pause it so that we can geek out for a moment and then discuss what we just saw and then press play again.
Something I appreciate about it, because a lot of media like going for the like subverting expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of at some point it can get to the extreme of like I'm not going to expect anything, like everything I like suggest is wrong, but here they fulfill everything that they have shown, and it's like, what is going on? This is weird. And in the next episode, they provide this satisfying context that gives a complete picture. There's nothing predictable about it, but they go back to explain what happened from the different perspective, which I feel is genuinely like well done.
Absolutely.
One of the best uses of time travel, like as a mechanic for a TV show, like, for storytelling.
Yeah, there is a rule in theater that if you show a gun, you have to shoot it.
Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's gun. Thank you. That's the way this show has been. You know, they present something and then there's a payoff for it every time. So, and it's not in, it wasn't until this last episode that I felt kind of ripped off
Yeah.
by that, wherein they're showing the gun. Episode 5 excuse me, episode 5 was all about showing the gun, and we would have to wait till episode 6 for the gun to be fired up. It So I didn't feel let down by that until this particular episode, and we already talked about that. But I haven't minded it until now because the payoffs have always been in an incredible way. Um, like the cliffhanger, like the episode,
Yeah.
the cliffhanger.
It took me a solid moment to realize, wait a minute, we just got a cliffhanger. But the way they did it was just like, that was perfect. Like, they did it perfectly.
And they answered it immediately. I mean, they kind of had no choice. I mean,
Yeah.
but at the same time, they did it in a way that made sense. How did they survive? Well, Loki jumped, basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got Mobius on the jet ski, maybe not in the way that we wanted it, but we got it. I kind of feel like that's going to be like the series finale. Like one of the final scenes in the series finale of the show is we're going to see Mobius, jet off into the sunset.
I hope so.
Yeah. Oh, the office in the TVA, OB's office in the TVA, is designed just like his office in wherever they were.
World.
Yeah, in his variant world. It's so cool.
His office is so neat.
It's and again, that's one of those little Easter eggs, that they plant there so that when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's his office from the TVA. So anyway, yeah, this show was good. It was so good. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about as this episode goes?
Honestly, I'm just excited for the next episode. I'm excited to continue the series, but overall, I've kind of thought about it, and almost in a way, I think this episode needed to be. I don't want to use the term filler because it comes as a derogatory,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a nice kind of like cleanser after the intense episode yet last week.
Mm.
I It's gonna pick right back up again. That's only the end of it. But I kind of appreciate, because you gotta think too, we're watching this week by week.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine the people who are gonna be watching this all together.
Yeah.
If they binge it, it's just like they're going up and up and up. It's getting more and more intense, and after a while, you lose that. Like you're gonna like lose momentum. But I felt like this was kind of like we're gonna take a breather.
Okay.
That is my thought about it.
Okay.
And honestly, so long as the last episode is awesome and feels like a fulfilling ending, I'm going to give this a 4.5.
4.5 butter pumps. Okay. All right. I'm going to flip this around so that I can say I actually disagree with you.
How dare you?
I disagree with you in that episode 4 ended on such a white knuckle cliffhanger that I wanted that same energy. I wanted that same energy. Yes, I do agree with, peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. And I see the wisdom in what you're saying about this being the calm, perhaps, before the storm. I get that, and I see the wisdom in that, but I needed this for me. Again, it wasn't a letdown because this was a freaking good episode. But for me, I kind of wished the stakes, even though they are incredibly high, I needed the urgency to be there that perhaps wasn't there. It was urgent, but that urgency, because of what they were trying to say in this episode, because of the story they were trying to tell in this episode, that urgency needed to be dialed back a little bit. And so I get it. I just would have liked to have seen just a little bit more urgency in it.
I can agree
So because of that, I'm going to give it 4 butter pumps. So I thought it was great. I outside of what we just said, those were our only frustrations or complaints about it. Not big ones, but next week, y'all. Next week is the big one, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait. What do you guys think? Have you seen Loki episode 4? If so, or episode 5? If so, what did you think about it? I want to hear all about it. Comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching.
And remember, for all time, always.
Correct. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for commenting. Thank you so much for subscribing. And we will see you next week. Bye.